Hi everyone, welcome to our latest episode of Democracy Today. Here and now, we're going to dive into what Darian called the military-industrial media entertainment network. We will focus on the relationship between such governmental institutions as the Pentagon and Hollywood in building our view of a war. As usual, watch, be informed, criticize, and think.
As Kant puts it, rulers will almost always seek to preserve their own power, even if this entails committing serious injustices against innocent people through aggressive and predatory wars. Jefferson, one of the founding fathers of the American Republic, wrote not so long after Kant that, in a democratic society, everything depends on the consent of the people. For Kant again, crowds hate war. Naturally, they don't want to fight at their own risk and peril or pay the costs of war from their own resources. That is where the struggle comes for a state, right? Thus, how did the US military convince its people that wars could be just and good? Even that being opposed to certain warfare could be a synonym of unpatriotic behavior? To answer those questions, let's go back to World War I. The whole of Wilson's 1916 electoral campaign was based on the idea that the United States are Pacific and that the European conflict will remain European. Only a month after his election, his discourse shifts. He now needs to convince the people of America that war is necessary. In the White House, debates arise. How can we control the mass to make them approve this presidential decision? How to persuade them that giving their blood for the nation is just and rewarding? His advisors came up with a great idea. We can create a system based on mass propaganda, which function will be to seduce the masses and involve them in the war effort. The Cree Commission is created in this purpose. It gathers specialists of communication, among which figures the now famous Edward Bernays, one of the founders of public relations and writers of propaganda. To fulfill this agenda, the Commission uses the code and tools of entertainment. Indeed, at the very same time, the motion picture industry is expanding. Working people have money to spend on entertainment. Cinema is starting to be understood as a powerful propaganda tool. If masses are irrational, as Bernays puts it, fictional production might be the best way to play on their emotions. As Tolstoy explained it, film blends into emotion and experience. They feel like real life, even though they are not. Hence, the whole of Hollywood is brought into the war effort. Stars of the time, such as Charlie Chaplin or Douglas Fairbanks, are hired by the government as charismatic leaders to convince the masses. Films such as My 4 Years in Germany, The Kaiser, The Beast of Berlin depict a terrible enemy. Atrocities alleged to have been committed by the Germans in Belgium are presented in melodramatic forms. D.W. Griffith, Heart of the World, appealed mass audiences all across the Atlantic. It's the story of a village of Eastern France. Before the war, everyone is happy and content. In this happy village, an unpleasant German tourist displays a curious interest in the strategic position of the village. In August 1914, the village is occupied by the German, and the tourist reveals its true colors. He is a German officer. Brutality and rape become commonplace during occupation. But a heroic collaboration of French and American army drives out the invaders. To quote Chomsky, the collaboration between Hollywood and the government turned the Pacific population into an army of anti-German fanatics. In 1941, America entered into World War II. Hollywood studios, working in association with the Pentagon, rapidly released war dramas and documentaries to boost the American war effort. In exchange, military officials provided equipment, personnel, and advice on numerous movies. Why We Fight is a series of 7 powerful films directed by Frank Capra under explicitly orders from Army Chief of Staff General Marshall. they still uses the old formula. As usual, they make sweeping generalization that dramatize all dichotomies between right and wrong, good and evil, and the free word versus the slave word. Overall, it focuses on the evil fanaticism of the enemy by representing the enemy's beliefs and goal. Now, you might think that such obvious propaganda tools remain at the beginning of the 20th century. But it's in 2009 that Dardorian wrote on the Military-Industrial Media Entertainment Network. He describes it as the colloquial relationship between militaries and political institutions on the one hand, and the very wide entertainment industries and academia on the other. Now, let's look at how the US government left the too negatively connoted propaganda for the politically correct public diplomacy. How did Hollywood escort the Department of Defense in its military adventures from Cold War to Iraq? In 1948, the Department of Defense doted itself of a motion picture liaison office in Los Angeles. With it, the film approval process is implemented. Since then, it is this office that has the power to shape and influence war film content. The informal agreement between the Motion Picture Liaison Office and Hollywood relies on a mutually beneficial relationship. When making war films, Hollywood studios need military hardware to shoot. In return, the Pentagon has influence on the world's most powerful medium, unchecked and unregulated. As David Robb writes, 50 years of collaboration has certainly helped the Pentagon get more recruits for the armed force and embellished the public opinion on war. In the hope of getting military goods, movie producers must submit their script to the Motion Picture LA office. The office reviews them and decides whether or not the scripts are fit for military assistance. Special military advisors are appointed to ensure that filmmakers do not attempt to introduce non-scripted innovation that depart from Pentagon directives. Major David Georgie, one of the Army's on-set technical advisors, said, "If they don't do what I want, I take my toys and go away." In the film approval process, such films as 13 Days, Wind Talkers, Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, or Hulk have seen their scripts modified by the LA office teams. In Whiskey Tango Foxtrot, the initial script portrayed a US Army transport brake failures, resulting in it hitting a group of Afghani shoppers in Kabul, killing and injuring them. Very simply, the US car was changed to an NGO vehicle. Phil Straub, chief of the office for 30 years, explained in several interviews that the DoD only support war films that depict the military as realistically as possible. To cite him again, any film that portrays the military as negative is not realistic to us. Filmmakers are taught that excessive full language, alcohol and drug use, sexism, racism, or other bigotry in the armed forces must be toned down and replaced with positive portrayals. Is Transformers a fair and realistic portrait of the US military? However, according to Gregory Bishop, Army Colonel, this blockbuster is the biggest joint operation movie ever made. We can understand why the scenario pleased the Pentagon. In the movie, a group of teenagers teams up with every branch of the US Army to kill bad alien robots and save the world. Indeed, in the post-Cold War media culture, the familiar Hollywood obsession with monstrous enemies takes a new turn, with the casting of movie demons shifting from conventional Nazis, Japs, Cooks, and Redskins to a new lineup of modern-day evildoers: Arabs, Muslim, assorted terrorists, rock tyrants, standout drug traffickers. For filmmakers and for the public, these modifications are not considered as censorship or heavy-handed government activities, but rather, as George Orwell puts it, unpopular ideas can be silenced and inconvenient facts kept dark, without the need for any official ban, not because of direct government intervention, but rather because of a general tacit agreement that it wouldn't do to mention the particular fact. Robert McKee, renowned creative instructor, explained that movies should not be stereotypical, but rather archetypical. To quote him, "We watch movies to live in a fiction reality that illuminates our daily reality. We do not wish to escape life, but to find life, to use our minds in fresh experimental ways, to flex our emotions, to enjoy, to learn, to add depth to our days. Us, audiences, like to be challenged, not patronized. Thank you for watching this episode of Democracy Today. As usual, watch, criticize, be informed, and think.